Husband and mistress humiliated his pregnant ex-wife in front of everyone. But she didn't yell. She didn't beg. She just slid the black card across the counter and paid for their groceries. And in that moment, the whole store went silent. Stay till the end, subscribe to this channel because what happens next will shatter secrets, expose greed, and change the game forever. Your card's been declined, sir. The beep echoed louder than it should have. Eric Harper didn't move. Behind him, someone sighed. A cartwheel squeaked. A phone camera lifted. His mistress laughed first. Oh my God, Eric, are you serious right now? The cashier tried again. Declined. The red letters glowed on the screen like a verdict. Insufficient funds. Lillian Kensington leaned against the cart, manicured fingers tapping the handle. You run a billion-dollar investment firm, and you can't pay for groceries? That's iconic. A few people chuckled. Eric forced a smile. It's a fraud alert. I moved some assets this morning. Hum. Lillian turned slightly, making sure her voice carried. Or maybe your ex-wife took the rest of it in the divorce. There was a shift in the air. Subtle. Heavy. Because she was there. 2 registers down. 7 months pregnant. Holding almond milk, prenatal vitamins, and a single container of soup. Jessica Harper didn't look up at first. She didn't have to. She knew that tone. She'd heard it in courtrooms. At galas. Across dinner tables where Eric had corrected her in front of senators. But now the whispers started. Isn't that her? That's his ex. She looks pregnant. Lillian followed their gaze. Her smile widened. Well, speak of the devil. Eric turned. For a second, just a second, he looked uncomfortable. Then he straightened his jacket like he was facing a shareholder meeting. Jessica. She lifted her eyes. Calm. Controlled. Unshaken. Eric. Lillian gave a little wave. Wow. This is awkward. I thought you moved out of the city after. You know, after he publicly accused her of emotional instability during the divorce proceedings. After he implied she couldn't handle the pressure of wealth. After he told the press she had no real involvement in his success. Jessica stepped forward, placing her basket down at the edge of her lane. The cashier cleared her throat. Sir, I'll need another form of payment. Eric checked his pockets. Nothing. His phone. No signal. He frowned. The Wi-Fi's down. The assistant manager glanced nervously toward the security office. Lillian crossed her arms. This is embarrassing. She lowered her voice just enough to sting. You know, Jessica always handled the household accounts. Maybe that's why things are falling apart. A few people laughed again. Jessica inhaled slowly. She didn't cry. She didn't react. She simply looked at the screen. $246.83. Imported wine. Gourmet steaks. Artisanal chocolates. Luxury skincare. Eric's jaw tightened. Jessica, since you're here, perhaps you could stop staring and help fix this. There it was. The assumption. The entitlement. The belief she still existed to clean up his mess. Lillian tilted her head. Although, can she afford it? I heard the settlement wasn't exactly generous. That was the line meant to crush her. Because what nobody in this store knew, what Eric had made sure nobody knew, was it that Jessica had walked away with almost nothing. At least that's what the headlines said. Jessica stepped out of her line. The store grew quiet. Every movement slowed. She reached into her purse, pulled out a matte black card, placed it gently on the counter. I'll cover it. The silence was immediate. Eric blinked. That won't be necessary. It already is. The cashier hesitated. Ma'am, it's $246.83. I heard you. She didn't look at Eric. She didn't look at Lillian. She just nodded once. Run it. Approved. The receipt was printed. Lillian let out a short laugh. Wow. That's sad. Jessica finally turned to her. Sad. No. There was nothing sad in her expression. Only something colder. I wouldn't want him to go without, Jessica said softly. He's not used to that. Eric stepped closer, lowering his voice. You don't need to make a scene. A scene, she repeated. You're pregnant, Jessica. You shouldn't stress yourself like this. Gaslighting. Even now. Even here. She looked down at her stomach for a brief moment. Then back at him. Stress, she said quietly, is being told you contributed nothing to a company you built from your kitchen table. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Eric's face hardened. Don't start rewriting history. Lillian rolled her eyes. Oh, please. If you built anything, you wouldn't be shopping alone on a Tuesday afternoon. That's when the assistant manager froze. That's when 2 employees stopped stocking shelves mid-motion. That's when the security monitor above register 4 flickered. Eric noticed. What's going on? He snapped. The store manager was already walking toward them. Not rushing. Walking. Carefully. Mrs. Carson, he said. The name dropped like a stone in water. Mrs. Carson. Not Harper. Not Whitmore. Carson. Eric blinked. What did you just call her? The manager swallowed. Is there a problem, ma'am? Lillian laughed. Yes, there's a problem. My boyfriend's card declined, and his ex-wife is playing hero. The manager didn't look at Lillian. He looked at Jessica. Waiting. Jessica's phone buzzed. She glanced at it. Quarterly revenue report. Carson Retail Group. Eric saw the logo. His expression shifted. What is that? He asked. Jessica slid her phone back into her purse. You really should read acquisition reports more carefully. The security monitors flickered again. Then every screen in the store changed. The weekly discounts disappeared, replaced by a corporate display. Carson Retail Group founder and CEO. Jessica Carson. Her face filled 12 screens at once. Forbes cover. Business Journal headline. Fastest growing female-owned retail chain in the Midwest. Eric went pale. Lillian stepped back. No. The manager straightened. This location, along with 52 others, is owned by Mrs. Carson. The silence was suffocating. Eric's voice came out thin. That's not possible. Jessica faced him fully now. Yes, she said calmly. It is. The whispers exploded. She owns the store? 52 locations? Wait, what? Eric's breathing changed. Because suddenly, his Wi-Fi being down made sense. His card declining made sense. The timing made sense. You did this, he whispered. Jessica's eyes didn't waver. You forgot your wallet, Eric. She paused. But you forgot something else. He swallowed. What? She leaned closer. Who handled your investments for 10 years? The weight of that sentence hit him harder than the declined card. Lillian's voice trembled. Eric, what is she talking about? He didn't answer. Because for the first time, he wasn't sure. Jessica stepped back. Enjoy your groceries, she said quietly. Then, loud enough for the store to hear. And keep the receipt. You'll want to remember who paid. The doors slid open as she walked toward them. Outside, 3 black SUVs had just pulled into the parking lot. Eric's phone buzzed violently in his hand. One notification after another. Emergency board meeting. Stock fluctuation alert. Margin call notice. His face drained of color. Jessica paused at the entrance. Turned once. Looked at the crowd, the cameras, the whispers, the women who had laughed. If you've ever been humiliated publicly, if you've ever been told you were nothing, If you've ever watched someone rewrite your story while you stayed silent, stay with this story, subscribe to this channel. Because sometimes silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's a strategy. And sometimes the person you tried to erase owns the ground you're standing on. Jessica stepped outside. The SUV's doors opened. And Eric Harper realized he hadn't just forgotten his wallet. He had just triggered a war. Eric didn't chase her. He couldn't. His phone kept vibrating in his hand like it was trying to escape. Lillian grabbed his arm. What is happening? Why are there news vans pulling into a grocery store parking lot? He looked outside. 2 black SUVs. Then a third. Then a local news vehicle. This wasn't random. This was orchestrated. His phone flashed again. Emergency board call. 4:30 p.m. Mandatory. Another alert. Harper Capital's liquidity position flagged. His chest tightened. That's impossible, he muttered. Lillian's voice rose. Eric. He snapped back. Not now. Inside the store, customers were no longer pretending not to stare. Phones were openly recording. The security screens still displayed Jessica's face above the registers like a silent coronation. The store manager approached cautiously. Sir, I'm going to need you to step aside. Eric stared at him. Do you know who I am? Yes, the manager replied evenly. That's why I'm asking. The humiliation hit differently this time. It wasn't loud. It was controlled. And that terrified him more. Outside, Jessica didn't get into the SUVs immediately. She stood beside them, speaking to a tall woman in a navy suit, her attorney, Claudia Benson. Claudia handed her a tablet. Eric saw his own company's logo reflected in the screen. His stomach dropped. Eric, Lillian whispered, panic replacing arrogance. Why is your stock dipping? Why are people tagging you on Twitter? He opened the app. #WalletGate was trending. A clip of his declined card already had 60,000 views. Another clip. Lillian laughing. Another. Jessica is placing her card down calmly. Then, the moment the monitors switched. The caption read, Billionaire publicly humiliates pregnant ex-wife. Doesn't realize she owns the store. The comments were brutal. She built him. Classic narcissist. Protect Jessica at all costs. Lillian's hand tightened on his sleeve. You told me she got nothing. She didn't, he snapped. Not from the settlement. That part was true. He had outmaneuvered her in court. Used the best attorneys. Pressured the board to freeze her executive access. Painted her as emotional, unstable, unfit for leadership. He had left her with a modest payout and a confidentiality clause. He had made sure she walked away quietly. Or so he thought. Claudia said something outside that made Jessica nod. Eric remembered that nod. He'd seen it once before. 10 years ago. In their apartment. Before Harper Capital had offices. Before the investors. Before the magazine covers. He had been pacing, frustrated after another rejected pitch. We don't have enough liquidity, he had said. No one wants to back a first-time fund manager without collateral. Jessica had been sitting at the kitchen table with spreadsheets open. You're pitching it wrong, she'd said calmly. He had scoffed. Oh. And how would you pitch it? She had rotated the laptop toward him. You're selling ego. Sell stability. Structure the fund in tranches. Lower initial risk. Cap downside exposure at 12% and guarantee transparency reporting monthly. He'd stared at her. Who taught you that? She'd shrugged. I read. She had always read. Regulatory filings. Market reports. Risk disclosures. She had built his early investor deck. She had negotiated his first institutional check. She had structured the offshore tax strategy. And when Harper Capital finally exploded into $1 billion firm, He stopped introducing her at events. She's not involved operationally, he'd say. She prefers privacy. The truth. She knew too much. And insecure men don't like women who know too much. Back in the present, Eric's phone rang. Board chairman. He answered. What did you do? The chairman barked. Nothing. You humiliated the CEO of Carson Retail Group on camera. Eric froze. You know. Everyone knows. She just announced a strategic position. His throat went dry. Position in what? Us. The word landed like a gunshot. That's not possible. She acquired 18% of Harper Capital through shell entities over the last 8 months. Eric felt the floor tilt. That's illegal. No. It's brilliant. The line went quiet for a second. Then the chairman added, You're about to lose control of your own company. The call ended. Lillian stared at him. Eric. He didn't respond. Because now it made sense. The Wi-Fi outage. The declined card. The timing. She hadn't just paid for groceries. She had made a statement. He looked outside again. Jessica was speaking to a reporter now. Microphones angled toward her. Cameras flashing. Her posture is steady. She wasn't crying. She wasn't attacking him. She was calm. And calm people with power are dangerous. Lillian's voice shook. You said she was unstable. He didn't answer. Because unstable people don't orchestrate corporate takeovers in silence. Another notification. Harper Capital stock down 11%. Margin call notice. He opened his banking app. 3 major accounts are temporarily frozen pending review. His breath shortened. She's attacking me, he whispered. Lillian stepped back slightly. For what? He almost laughed. For what? 4 years of dismissal. For rewriting history. For telling the world she contributed nothing. For making her question her sanity. For replacing her publicly 3 months after the divorce. For calling her pregnancy inconvenient timing. Yes, that last one. He had said that in private. But cruelty has a way of echoing. Inside the store, someone shouted, Team Jessica. A few people clapped. Eric felt the shift. Public opinion was not neutral. It was choosing sides. And it wasn't choosing him. If you've ever watched someone take credit for your work, if you've ever been erased from your own story, if you've ever been told to stay quiet to protect someone else's reputation, this is the moment you wait for. The moment truth stops whispering and starts moving markets. Outside, Jessica handed the tablet back to Claudia. Then she did something that made Eric's blood run cold. She looked directly at him. Across the parking lot. Across the cameras. Across the wreckage of their marriage. And she smiled. Not sweetly. Not kindly. Strategically. Then she turned to the reporters and said something that microphones barely caught. But Eric read her lips. This is only the beginning. His phone buzzed again. Another alert. Special shareholder vote proposed. Motion to remove Eric Harper as CEO. Effective immediately. Lillian's voice cracked. Eric, are you losing your company? He stared at the screen. Because for the first time in years, he didn't control the narrative. And the woman he thought he had destroyed had been building a throne out of his blind spots. Outside, Jessica stepped into the SUV. The door shut. The convoy began to move. Eric stood frozen in the grocery store aisle he no longer controlled. And somewhere between the declined card and the trending hashtag, the balance of power had shifted. His phone rang again. Unknown number. He answered. A calm male voice spoke. Mr. Harper, this is federal compliance. We need to discuss discrepancies in your offshore filings. Eric's grip tightened. What discrepancies? A pause. Then. The ones Mrs. Carson flagged. The line went dead. The store was no longer silent. It was watching. And Eric Harper finally understood. He hadn't just humiliated his pregnant ex-wife. He had just awakened her. Eric didn't go home. He went straight to the office. Top floor. Glass walls. The skyline he once believed he owned. By the time he stepped out of the elevator, the energy had changed. Assistants avoided eye contact. 2 board members were already inside the conference room. And the television mounted on the far wall was replaying the grocery store clip. Over and over. Declined card. Lillian laughing. Jessica placed her black card down. The monitors are switching. The anchor's voice cut through the room. Sources confirm Jessica Carson now holds an 18% stake in Harper Capital and has formally requested an emergency shareholder vote. Eric muted the TV. This is a smear campaign, he said sharply. She's weaponizing optics. Board chairman Robert Ellison folded his hands calmly. Optics don't freeze liquidity accounts, Eric. Eric's jaw tightened. That's temporary. Is it? Silence. Robert slid a document across the table. Carson Retail Holdings. Strategic Investment Breakdown. Eric scanned it. Layered shell corporations. Quiet acquisitions. Minority buyouts through intermediaries. Timing that aligned perfectly with Harper Capital's overseas expansion. She had studied his weak spots. And she had waited. How long? He asked quietly. Robert didn't blink. 7 months. 7 months. 7 months of smiling headlines. 7 months of public appearances with Lillian. 7 months of him believing Jessica was rebuilding her life quietly somewhere in the suburbs. He leaned back slowly. She doesn't have the leverage to remove me. Robert's expression didn't change. She doesn't need majority control. She only needs doubt. Eric's phone buzzed again. Another alert. SEC inquiry opened. Preliminary review. He felt heat creep up his neck. This is retaliation, he said. She's angry. Robert exhaled slowly. Eric, anger doesn't draft this level of strategy. This is precision. The door opened without knocking. Claudia Benson walked in. Composed. I believe you received the notice, she said evenly. Eric stared at her. You don't get to just walk in here. I do, she replied. As legal counsel for the second largest voting bloc in this building. The room went quiet. Claudia placed a folder on the table. Mrs. Carson is requesting a forensic audit of Harper Capital's offshore subsidiaries. Eric stood. This is harassment. Claudia met his gaze. No. This is governance. Robert leaned forward. Is there something we should know? Eric looked at him sharply. Absolutely not. Claudia didn't move. Then you won't object to transparency. There it was. The trap. Because transparency was the one thing Eric had avoided. Not illegally. Not blatantly. But strategically. Aggressive tax shelters. Risk-heavy leverage structures. Creative accounting that danced near the line without stepping over it. Or so he believed. Eric forced a smile. Fine. Audit away. Claudia nodded once. We will. She turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Eric. Mrs. Carson sends her regards. The door shut. The air felt thinner. Robert broke the silence. Is there exposure? Eric didn't answer immediately. Because exposure wasn't the word. Dependency was. He had built Harper Capital on leverage. On confidence. On perception. And perception was collapsing in real time. Across town, Jessica stepped into her downtown office. Floor-to-ceiling windows. No marble excess. No ego-driven decor. Just screens. Data. Control. Claudia's call came through. He agreed to the audit, Claudia said. Jessica nodded slowly. Good. He's rattled. He should be. Claudia hesitated. Are you sure you want to escalate publicly? Jessica looked out over the city. He had once told her she didn't understand power. He had told her she was too emotional for boardrooms. He had told investors she preferred to stay home. He had told the press she played no strategic role. And when she objected, he had questioned her stability. Quietly, strategically. She turned back to her desk. File the motion. Claudia paused. You're certain? Jessica's voice didn't waver. He made me invisible. Now he gets to watch. Back at Harper Capital, Lillian sat alone in Eric's office. Scrolling. Her followers were exploding. But not in admiration. Clips of her laughter were everywhere. Memes. Edits. Side-by-side comparisons of her mocking Jessica, and Jessica owning the store. Her phone rang. Her modeling agency. She answered. Tell me this is PR, the agent said. It's nothing, Lillian insisted. Just a misunderstanding. Brands are pulling, the agent replied flatly. They don't align with public humiliation of pregnant women. The line went dead. Her reflection in Eric's glass wall didn't look glamorous anymore. It looked uncertain. Meanwhile, Eric stared at the numbers on his tablet. Liquidity strain. Investor withdrawal inquiries. 2 major clients are requesting emergency meetings. And then, one more alert. Private equity partner considering vote against CEO. He slammed the tablet down. This is coordinated, he muttered. Across town, Jessica's assistant walked in. Media is requesting a statement. Jessica considered it. Then shook her head. Not yet. Why? Because silence makes them curious. Curiosity builds tension. Tension moves markets. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered. A familiar voice. Jessica. She didn't react. It was Eric. You've made your point. My point. Yes. The grocery store. The shares. The audit. Enough. She walked toward the window slowly. You thought I was done when I walked out of that courtroom. He exhaled sharply. You could destroy everything. She didn't raise her voice. Everything? Or just what you built on top of me? Silence. He shifted tactics. We can negotiate. She almost smiled. Negotiate. Now. After the humiliation. After the dismissal. After the public erasure. You taught me leverage, Eric, she said quietly. Don't be surprised I learned. His tone hardened. Be careful. There it was. The threat. She didn't flinch. No, she replied softly. You should be. She ended the call. And then she did something Eric never expected. She opened a folder labeled Harper Capital, Internal Correspondence Archive. Years of emails. Strategic drafts. Original investment models. Her fingerprints were everywhere. But so were his. Including one file she had never used. Until now. She forwarded it to Claudia. Subject line. If necessary. Across the city, Eric's phone buzzed again. Another alert. Breaking. Carson Retail announces shareholder town hall tomorrow morning. He frowned. Why a town hall? Robert asked. Eric stared at the screen. Because town halls aren't for investors. They're for statements. He knew Jessica. If she was calling a town hall, she wasn't just defending herself. She was about to reveal something. And Eric Harper suddenly realized. This wasn't about revenge. This was about exposure. If you've ever watched someone manipulate the narrative while you stayed silent, if you've ever felt powerless while someone else rewrote history, this is what accountability looks like. It doesn't scream. It documents. And tomorrow, The world might finally see what Eric Harper built his empire on. The next morning would not be about groceries. It would not be about a declined card. It would be about evidence. And as Eric stared at the notification flashing on his phone, he understood one terrifying truth. Jessica hadn't just bought shares. She had saved receipts. The auditorium was full before Eric even arrived. Not investors. Employees. Managers. Regional directors. Carson retail staff from across the state. The banner behind the stage read, Carson Retail Group, Shareholder and Community Address. Eric watched the live stream from his office. He had no invitation. But he had access. And access had always been his weapon. Until now. Jessica stepped onto the stage without an introduction. No dramatic music. No grand entrance. Just presence. The applause wasn't wild. It was loyal. She waited until it quieted. Then she spoke. Thank you for coming. Her voice was steady. This company was built on transparency, discipline, and long memory. Eric's jaw tightened. Long memory. She continued. Yesterday, something happened publicly that many of you saw. A soft ripple moved through the room. I was reminded that power often assumes silence equals weakness. She let that sit. It does not. Eric muted the audio for a second, pacing. She's playing victim, he muttered. But when he unmuted, she wasn't playing anything. She was presenting. A slide appeared behind her. Harper Capital. Early structural model. Eric froze. It was the original deck. The one from their apartment. The one she had built. Her name was on the metadata. Time-stamped. Archived. Proven. Jessica didn't look at the screen. I've stayed quiet for years regarding my involvement in Harper Capital's early development. The audience shifted. But silence, she added, should not be mistaken for absence. Another slide. Email threads. Redacted, but clear. Strategic risk analysis. Offshore structuring discussions. Eric's breathing changed. Robert walked into his office quietly. You want to explain why your ex-wife has archived internal projections from before series of funding? Eric didn't respond. On stage, Jessica continued. After my divorce, I was advised to protect my peace. A few people nodded. But peace, she said softly, does not require erasure. The next slide appeared. A timeline. 7 months of share acquisition. Layered through holding companies. Executed legally. Carefully. Strategically. I did not act impulsively, she said. I prepared. Eric whispered. This is character assassination. Robert's voice was calm. No. This is documentation. Jessica stepped away from the podium. When I was told I had contributed nothing, I believed it for a moment. That line landed differently. Because it wasn't defensive. It was honest. And I want to say something to anyone who has ever been told that. The room went still. If someone convinces you that your value was accidental, look at the receipts. A few employees clapped softly. Eric felt something unfamiliar. Not anger. Fear. Because this wasn't emotional. It was surgical. Then Jessica did something unexpected. She smiled faintly. And since transparency is important. The screen changed. Harper Capital. Current liquidity overview. The numbers weren't detailed enough to violate confidentiality. But they were suggestive. Aggressive leverage ratios. Risk exposure charts. Publicly available data. Organized in a way Eric had never seen presented before. Clear. Accessible. Dangerous. Robert stepped closer to Eric's desk. Are those projections accurate? They're interpretations, Eric snapped. Robert didn't look convinced. On stage, Jessica kept her tone level. I am not here to destroy a company, she said. I am here to ensure accountability within it. Then she paused. And to correct the narrative. The next slide appeared. A single line. Original investment strategy, co-architect, Jessica Carson. The room applauded louder this time. Eric's phone buzzed again. Private equity partner. He answered. We're reconsidering our support, the voice said bluntly. This is reputational suicide. Eric's control cracked slightly. She's exaggerating. Is she? The call ended. Back at the auditorium, Jessica stepped forward again. I was publicly humiliated yesterday. No dramatics. Just a fact. I was mocked while pregnant. Dismissed as irrelevant. A murmur moved through the crowd. She didn't look angry. She looked resolved. And I paid the bill. A few quiet laughs. But I did not pay to be kind. That line hit. I paid because I always settle my accounts. Eric closed his eyes. Because he knew that tone. It was the one she used when she had already calculated 3 moves ahead. She continued. Today, I am formally requesting a shareholder vote to review executive leadership at Harper Capital. There it was. Not a threat. A process. Legal. Structured. Brutal. The audience clapped again. But it wasn't excitement. It was alignment. Eric's screen flashed. Harper Capital stock down 19%. His breathing grew shallow. Robert looked at him carefully. You told us she wasn't involved. She wasn't operationally. But strategically? Eric didn't answer. On stage, Jessica concluded calmly. This is not revenge. She let that breathe. It is correction. The applause was stronger now. She stepped away from the podium. But before leaving, she turned back. One more thing. The room quieted instantly. I have submitted documentation to regulatory authorities regarding offshore filings I believe warrant review. Eric's heart slammed against his ribs. Robert's face hardened. You didn't disclose that, he said quietly. Eric stared at the screen. She wouldn't. But she had. On stage, Jessica's expression didn't change. I believe transparency protects everyone. Then she walked off. No mic drop. No celebration. Just exit. Eric's phone erupted. SEC. Federal compliance. 2 board members are requesting immediate resignation discussion. Lillian burst into the office. Eric, brands are dropping me. What did you do? He didn't answer. Because for the first time, he didn't know what the next move was. His empire had always been built on confidence. And confidence was evaporating. Robert spoke slowly. If there's anything we need to know before the vote. Eric looked at him sharply. There isn't. Robert held his gaze. You're sure? Eric hesitated. And that hesitation was louder than any confession. Across town, Jessica stepped into her car. Claudia looked at her. You escalated. Jessica nodded. Yes. Claudia's voice softened. Are you prepared for what he might do next? Jessica stared out the window. Eric didn't lose gracefully. He attacked. He manipulated. He rewrote stories. But this time, she had the documents. And something else. Leverage. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered. A quiet voice spoke. Mrs. Carson. I work in Harper Capital's compliance department. She listened. There are files you haven't seen. Jessica's expression sharpened. What kind of files? A pause. The kind that could end him. The line went dead. Jessica slowly lowered the phone. Claudia watched her carefully. What was that? Jessica looked ahead. Insurance. Back in his office, Eric received an email. Subject line. Internal whistleblower inquiry. His hands went cold. Because there was only one folder he had never allowed anyone to open. One deal. One transaction. One signature. And if that file surfaced, this would no longer be a power struggle. It would be a collapse. Eric Harper stared at the skyline he once thought he owned. And for the first time, he realized the war wasn't about control anymore. It was about survival. Eric didn't sit. He couldn't. The skyline outside his office felt closer now. Pressing in, watching. His inbox refreshed again. Board emergency session. 7:30 p.m. Mandatory. He exhaled slowly. This wasn't panic. This was pressure. And pressure could still be redirected. Find the compliance officer, he told Robert without looking at him. Quietly. Robert didn't move. That would be obstruction if there's an active inquiry. Eric's jaw flexed. It's clarification. Robert held his stare for a long moment. Then left without answering. Eric's phone buzzed again. Private number. He hesitated, then answered. A familiar voice. Calm. Polished. I told you not to underestimate her. Eric's stomach tightened. You're enjoying this. On the other end, a soft chuckle. You built your reputation on precision. You should have recognized it in her. Eric ended the call without responding. Across town, Jessica was no longer in the car. She was back in her own office. Not dramatic. Not extravagant. Just clean lines and deliberate order. Claudia closed the door behind them. That compliance call wasn't random, Claudia said. You think it's a trap? Jessica sat slowly. No. Her voice was steady. I think it's fear. She opened her laptop. 3 encrypted messages had arrived since she left the auditorium. Anonymous attachments. Subject lines. Offshore vehicle. Cyprus. Deferred loss structure. Personal guarantee. Her pulse didn't spike. It sharpened. She opened the first document. A layered holding company. Secondary fund transfers. Not illegal on its face. But aggressive. Too aggressive. The second file. Her breath paused. Eric's signature. Not corporate. Personal. He had guaranteed liquidity exposure through a private account. If regulators dug deeper, Harper Capital wouldn't just wobble. It would fracture. Claudia watched her expression change. What is it? Jessica turned the screen toward her. Claudia's face went pale. He tied his personal assets to the offshore structure. Jessica nodded once. That's not a defensive strategy, Claudia whispered. That's desperation. Back at Harper Capital, the boardroom filled faster than usual. Tension had a smell. Eric entered last. Controlled. Collected. He took his seat at the head of the table like nothing had shifted. Board member 1 leaned forward. Did you personally guarantee liquidity against Fund 3 exposure? Eric didn't blink. That's a private structuring detail. It's a yes or no question. Eric folded his hands. Yes. Silence. Why wasn't that disclosed during our last audit? Another member asked. It didn't require disclosure. Robert finally spoke. It does if it creates cross-liability risk. Eric's eyes flicked toward him. Betrayal. Small. But real. Before Eric could respond, the screen at the end of the boardroom flickered. An email notification. Regulatory inquiry. Formal documentation request. Eric stared at it. Someone had moved faster than he anticipated. He excused himself without explanation. In the hallway, he dialed a number he had sworn never to use again. It rang twice. A woman answered. You said you'd never call. I need you to shut something down, Eric said quietly. A pause. That depends on what it is. He swallowed. Compliance escalation. Silence on the line. Then, if the file's already flagged, I can't bury it. I'm not asking you to bury it. Then what are you asking? Eric's voice dropped lower. Delay. Across town, Jessica's phone vibrated again. This time, a text. They're trying to freeze internal access logs. Move now. Her eyes narrowed. Claudia saw it. What happened? He's reacting. Jessica stood. Good. She opened a secure portal and uploaded the documents she had received to an external legal archive. Time-stamped. Immutable. Then she did something unexpected. She forwarded a summarized version. Not to regulators. Not to the press. To the Harper Capital Board. Subject line. For transparency before tonight's vote. Claudia blinked. You're giving them leverage? I'm giving them clarity, Jessica replied. Minutes later in the boardroom, phones began buzzing one by one. Board members glanced at their screens, opened the attachments, looked up slowly. Eric returned to the room just in time to see their expressions shift. Not angry. Not emotional. Certain. Board member 1 slid a tablet across the table. Is this authentic? Eric looked down. His own signature stared back at him. The Cypress structure. The personal guarantee. The deferred loss roll-forward strategy. His silence this time wasn't hesitation. It was a calculation collapsing. You exposed the entire firm, someone said quietly. I protected it, Eric snapped. No, Robert replied calmly. You protected yourself. That landed. Harder than anything Jessica had said on stage. Eric leaned back slowly. You think removing me fixes this? He asked. If regulators proceed, this firm survives only if it separates from the decision, another member answered. Eric's voice sharpened. And you think she won't destroy you next? No one answered. Because they weren't afraid of Jessica. They were afraid of exposure. Across town, Jessica's screen refreshed. Harper Capital stock. Down 27%. Claudia inhaled. You've forced their hand. Jessica's gaze didn't move from the screen. No, she said quietly. He did. Her phone rang again. The same compliance voice. Breathing faster this time. They're locking down internal servers. Too late, Jessica replied calmly. You've already copied what matters. A pause. There's something else, the voice whispered. Jessica's spine straightened. What? The Cypress file wasn't the worst of it. Silence stretched. There's a secondary ledger. Not on company servers. Jessica's pulse ticked once. Where? Another pause. Under your name. The line went dead. Claudia stared at her. What does that mean? Jessica's mind moved faster than fear. If Eric had created a shadow ledger and attached it to her identity, this wasn't just a financial collapse. It was a legal entanglement. Framing. Across the city, in the Harper boardroom, the chairman cleared his throat. We are initiating an immediate vote of no confidence. Eric didn't flinch. But inside, for the first time, he understood something critical. Jessica hadn't just come for his position. She had anticipated his retaliation. And if there was a ledger under her name, then this war wasn't entering its final stage. It was detonating. Jessica slowly closed her laptop. If he's tied something to me, she said quietly, then he's not trying to survive. Claudia swallowed. He's trying to take you down with him. Jessica looked toward the darkening skyline. No, she corrected softly. He's trying to make sure if he falls. She reached for her phone again. I fall first. And somewhere inside Harper Capital's secured archive, a hidden file began uploading itself automatically. Destination. Federal server. The subject line read, Contingency release. In event of termination. Eric's name wasn't the only one on it. And when that file finished transferring, this wouldn't be a boardroom crisis anymore. It would be a public reckoning. To anyone who has ever been blamed for something you didn't build, tied to decisions you didn't make, or forced to defend your name because someone powerful needed a shield. This is where you don't retreat. This is where you gather proof. This is where you stand. Because when the truth surfaces, it doesn't just expose villains. It exposes who they tried to bury with them. And the next move. It won't be strategic. It will be explosive. The upload finished at 9:42 p.m. Eric felt it before he saw it. His phone vibrated once. Then again. Then relentlessly. The boardroom doors opened without a knock. Robert stepped back inside, slower this time. Not cautious. Measured. "It's gone federal," he said quietly. Eric didn't ask what that meant. He already knew. The contingency file had triggered. And it hadn't just exposed offshore structuring. It had exposed the secondary ledger. The one hidden through a private data vault. The one tied, strategically, maliciously, to Jessica's name. But Eric hadn't anticipated one detail. The vault didn't just track transfers. It tracked authorship, digital fingerprints, access keys, creation timestamps, and every alteration. On a federal server across the city, a forensic analyst zoomed in on the metadata. The ledger wasn't created by Jessica. It wasn't even created on a device connected to her accounts. It had been drafted on a private terminal registered to Eric Harper. Back in the boardroom, a compliance officer entered holding a tablet. "They've requested immediate cooperation." Eric stood. "They don't have context. They have structure," the officer replied. "And intent." Across town, Jessica sat in silence as her own phone rang. Unknown federal line. She answered calmly. "Mrs. Carson," the voice began, professional but firm. "We've identified a financial ledger attached to shell activity under your name. We believe it was structured to implicate you." Claudia's breath caught. Jessica didn't flinch. "And?" she asked. "There's evidence it was planted." Silence. "Then, we'll need a formal statement." Jessica's eyes lifted toward the skyline. "I'll be there." She ended the call. Claudia stared at her. "He tried to frame you." Jessica nodded once. "Yes." There was no anger in her face. Only confirmation. At Harper Capital, the emergency vote concluded. Unanimous. Eric's position as CEO was terminated effective immediately. He didn't argue. Didn't shout. Didn't beg. He simply gathered his phone and jacket. But as he stepped into the hallway, security was waiting. Not aggressive. Procedural. "We've been advised to restrict system access pending investigation." Eric gave a small, disbelieving laugh. "You think this is over?" One of the guards met his eyes. "No, sir. It's just beginning." Outside, cameras had already gathered. News traveled faster than loyalty. A headline began circulating. Harper Capital CEO ousted amid financial probe. But another headline followed minutes later. Whistleblower documents suggest attempted framing of former spouse. Eric saw that one. And for the first time, his composure cracked. Because exposure was survivable. Prison was survivable. But humiliation, public unraveling, that was something he had built his life avoiding. Across the city, Jessica stepped out of her car in front of the federal building. No theatrics. No press conference. Just take calm steps forward. But as she reached the entrance, a black SUV pulled up behind her. The window rolled down. Eric. He shouldn't have been there. But he was. They locked eyes across the pavement. For a moment, everything else faded. "You could have walked away," he called out. Jessica didn't turn fully toward him. "You could have told the truth." His jaw tightened. You think they won't destroy you too? She met his stare now. I'd rather stand in the truth than hide in your shadow. Silence stretched between them. You built that company with me, he said quietly. And you tried to erase me from it, she replied. His voice lowered. If I fall, you fall with me. Jessica's expression didn't shift. No. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. You made one mistake. Eric's eyes narrowed. You assumed I didn't prepare for that. Behind her, the federal doors opened. An agent stepped out. Mrs. Carson? She nodded. And without looking back, she walked inside. Eric sat frozen in the SUV. His phone buzzed again. Another notification. Asset freeze, pending investigation. Then another. Personal accounts under review. The empire he built wasn't collapsing slowly. It was imploding in real time. And he had no one left to redirect blame toward. Inside the federal building, Jessica handed over a final encrypted drive. There's more than what was uploaded, she said calmly. The agent studied her. You held this back? I waited to see if he would escalate. And when he did, I responded. Outside, reporters began shouting questions as Eric's SUV was approached. He rolled the window up. But it was too late. His name was no longer synonymous with power. It was synonymous with investigation. And Jessica? She wasn't vindictive. She wasn't hysterical. She was documented. Strategic. Unbreakable. Hours later, as the news cycle ignited and stock markets reacted overseas, Jessica stood alone in her office. The city lights flickered below. Claudia entered quietly. It's everywhere. Jessica nodded. This isn't revenge, Claudia said softly. Jessica's gaze remained steady. No. A pause. It's a consequence. Her phone vibrated one last time. A message from an unknown number. You weren't the only one he underestimated. Attached. A new file. Different structure. Different signatures. Different names. Jessica's eyes narrowed slightly. This wasn't a cleanup. This was an expansion. Eric hadn't acted alone. Claudia watched her expression change. What is it? Jessica closed the laptop slowly. The board was only the first layer. Outside, sirens echoed faintly in the distance. And somewhere across the city, Eric realized something terrifying. The war he thought he was fighting against one woman was about to expose an entire network. And this time, there would be no negotiation. If you've ever been silenced, minimized, or blamed for someone else's corruption, if you've ever watched someone powerful twist your name to protect their ego, let this be the reminder. Documentation defeats manipulation. Preparation outlives intimidation. And silence is not weakness. It is a strategy waiting for the right moment. Stand firm. Gather proof. Refuse erasure. Because when truth moves, it doesn't knock. It detonates. And just as the first arrest warrant was drafted, another notification appeared on Jessica's secure server. Incoming transfer, undisclosed account holder. D. Harper. Amount. $12.4 million. No explanation. No memo. Claudia looked at her, stunned. Jessica didn't speak. Because that wasn't a mistake. It was leverage. And the final question wasn't whether Eric would fall. It was whether he had just tried to buy her silence. Or if someone else had just set them both up. The screen flickered. Another name surfaced in the transaction trail. One that neither of them expected. The camera lights outside grew brighter. The sirens got closer. And Jessica realized. The story wasn't ending. It was widening. Power built on deception always collapses under truth. But sometimes, when the dust settles, you discover the villain was only one piece of something much larger. If this story stirred something in you, if you've ever fought to reclaim your name, your work, or your dignity, Remember this: the truth is strongest when you refuse to bury it. Don't stay silent to protect someone who never protected you. Stand up. Document everything. And when the moment comes, be ready.